right? Deuteronomy 12, let's call this one rejoice. Why? Because that term is literally going to come up at least 3 times in this chapter, which reminded me that no matter how cumbersome these rules might seem, they are designed to make sure that Israel can simply have joy in the days ahead, in the promised land ahead. And likewise, even though as Christians, we do not believe that we are under this old covenant, we still have the law of Christ. And even that can seem cumbersome if we lose track of the fact that likewise, the things that he is counseling us to do are designed so that we can have joy, not only in the days immediately ahead, but forever. And so ultimately, when we're looking at chapters like this in Deuteronomy 12, it is a reminder of the point. And the point, quite simply, is for them to rejoice, at least in this chapter for sure. Why? How do we know? Verse 7, and there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and you shall rejoice, you and your household, in all that you undertake, in which the Lord your God has blessed you. He's going to say that again in verse 12, or at least something similar, where it reads, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God, you and your sons and your daughters, your male servants and your female servants, and the Levite that is within your town, since he has no portion or inheritance with you. Likewise, in verse 18, skipping down partway through the verse, it's going to say, and you shall rejoice before the Lord your God in all that you undertake. This is also going to be an early indication of the necessity of faith. It's not just a New Testament principle. Why? Because they are not necessarily going to know why they have to go to a certain place in order to be able to rejoice with God, but they do. There are times when in life we are going to have to, whether you believe in God or not, accept wise counsel. And there are people who God will bring in our way who are telling us the right thing to do, even though we don't understand it. If we pass on their advice simply because it doesn't make sense to us in the moment, we are passing on wise counsel and wisdom that could benefit our lives. And so we all have to discern times in which we have to be able to trust people in our lives, whether or not we understand everything that they're telling us to do. Likewise, there are going to be 4 things that God is going to tell them that they need to stay away from if they are going to be able to genuinely rejoice in the promised land. The first thing is, like you said before, you have to thoroughly clear out the things that got the previous tenants evicted, the people of the land who were there before you. No matter how prosperous they seem, no matter how wise they may seem in the ways in which they are taking care of their property and their stuff, understand they are trending down and you are trending up. You can't do the things that they are doing because those are the things that got them evicted. But God is impartial. So likewise, there's more than one way to screw up. He's saying you already have some habits that you need to get rid of. So you don't have to repeat their habits to get evicted too. Currently, they're in the habit of doing whatever they want. And he's saying if, as the children of Israel, you're doing whatever you want, you can get the same results going a different way. And so there are 2 bad habits you need to stay away from. 1, the bad habits of the people around you who are getting evicted. And 2, the bad habits you just have not chosen to separate out of your own practices. 3, he's going to tell them you need to make sure not to eat the blood of the sacrifices. Once again, that involves faith. We don't necessarily understand why he cares about the blood. He's going to say that the life is in the blood of the animal. But beyond that, we don't necessarily understand that. At least I don't. But that doesn't mean that the advice does not have objective value. And so we all need to be able to function in situations where we don't necessarily understand the minutia of the advice so that we can trust which advice really will bless us, whether or not we understand all its mechanics. Finally, he's going to say you need to remember those who are living sacrificially, the Levites. Don't leave them out. They have been called to dedicate their lives to God so that you don't have to give your firstborn over to do the same. Understanding that, modern illustration is sometimes we love to say, remember our first responders. That is honorable, and that is a similar principle. Anyone who is living genuinely sacrificially deserves a certain amount of respect, even though sacrificial professions don't always involve a genuine sacrifice. I remember reading a book by someone who was in the Peace Corps while I was overseas, and he was talking about some of us joined the Peace Corps just to pad our resumes. Others joined for various reasons that don't necessarily have to do with the best interest of the mission. But to the degree that there are people who are genuinely living sacrificially, we would be wise to show them respect, especially to the degree that they're making sacrifices we are unwilling to make and doing the very things that keep us from having to be spread too thin. Once again, these things are all designed for us to rejoice, insofar as we do not get so overwhelmed by the things that God is counseling us to do that we lose track of the fact that he's simply trying to counsel us into a place of prolonged rejoicing, which is why we often say his best to you as you go forward in him.